In this episode, we discuss what role, if any, that homework should play in a math classroom across the K through 12 grade bands. Stick around as we dig into some common rules of thumb, such as the 10 minutes of homework per day per grade rule, what different groups and organizations are suggesting, and of course, what the research tells us.
As always, we'll be giving you some of our perspectives based on some of our opinions and research out there as well, as we'll dig into some of the strategies we've used over the years to help you get a hold of your homework situation. Grab onto your homework binders and grab a pencil, because class is out and it's time to dig in your homework for the day.
All right. Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm Jon Orr. We are two math teachers from MakeMathMoments.com, and together,
with you, the community of math moment makers worldwide who want to build and deliver problem-based math lessons that spark curiosity,
fuel sense-making,
and ignite your teacher moves. My friends, we are excited to dig into yet another episode of the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. And tonight, we're going to dig into a topic that I think is a little contentious there, Jon. We've had some people asking us over the years inside the academy. We get lots of emails about it. Homework, the idea of homework in K through 12, not just in math class, but particularly in our context in the math classroom, comes up quite a bit. And I feel like people aren't really sure what is the right move.
Yeah, and you're right. We get people who are in our academy or have taken our courses, or they message us on social media and ask, "Hey, we know that you guys are teaching problem-based lessons. You are trying to get kids to be thinkers in your classroom. You get discussions going, and we've got a lot of that happening in our classrooms." And they're saying, "How does homework fit into that plan? How do you guys handle homework?" So we want to address that here. And so we're going to talk about some research. We're going to talk about some kind of rules of thumb. We're going to talk about our experience with homework, what we've done in the past, what we do now. We want to give you those insights so you can make your own decisions. And that probably will be a main message here, is how does it fit in for you in your own classroom? And that's a lot of things that when you hear suggestions at the lunchroom table, or at a conference, or on a podcast like this one, we should always ask ourselves the question, how does that thing fit in with what I'm doing in my classroom? How does it fit in with my personality? How does that fit in with some of the rules that I have to follow, but also what I'm looking for in my classroom? What do I hold true? What do I hold in value in my classroom with my students? How does that thing fit with that? So you want to ask those questions. So the fact that you are listening to this right now and you've clicked play on this title, you're looking to see what can fit in your classroom as well.
I love it. And Jon, when we think about homework, I feel like humans in general, we've talked about it before, we're always looking for sort of these rules, like easy generalizations, things that we can kind of rely on to essentially allow us to tap into that side of the brain, the quick thinking side of the brain. So we don't actually have to expend any energy thinking about it. And this 10 minutes per night per grade rule, I've heard it before. I haven't actually myself thought about it much, to be honest, as a teacher, but I've seen it come up a lot. I hear people reference it. And in some scenarios, it sort of feels, kind of right. Like, for example...
So 10 minutes. So let's just wait a minute. So 10 minutes per grade level, 10 minutes per grade level per year. Okay. Per night. So it's so if I teach fifth grade, my students, 50
minutes of homework. Now,
that sounds like a lot, Kyle. That sounds like a lot for 50.
Well, you picked a bad one, Jon, because I said in some scenarios, it sounds right. Like when you say first grade, 10 minutes, I'm like, yeah, that seems okay. We're not going to, in 10 minutes, I'm picturing that might be one problem. Like if a student's just bringing home one context, and it has maybe some visuals there. It's not super text heavy. And now, I look at the benefit of that, Jon, and I think about it from like the parent's perspective. I'm a parent of a grade 1 student, and my child comes home, has this problem it gives me in like kind of like a window into the classroom as to like what they're up to. It's like, oh, they're like fair sharing. Like they're taking like these 8 things and they're going to give it to these 4 people. And oh my gosh, they're doing division and they're doing it in a really like, easy sort of manageable way. Amazing. 10 minutes. But then when you fast forward to 5th grade, which I feel like is like, these are still young kids,
right?
Like,
and I think it's before
right?
we go on, I think 50 minutes is for all subjects, not just mathematics.
All subjects, yes.
But still 50 minutes is a lot for homework, say for 5th grade, is my opinion. This is my opinion. This is just like, this is my, this is no experience teaching 5th grade. John talking about here. This is John as a parent kind of thinking about that. I'm thinking about 50 minutes, but I definitely would see like some work come home with my own kids at that level. What about you, Kyle?
Definitely. Like my son Landon's in 3rd grade and Talia is in 5th grade. So like the 5th grade really rung true with me because I feel like this school year, we've come out of the pandemic. Our children are in like music and different sports and things like we are a very active family right now. And I'm telling you, it is making my head spin. And that's like without really having homework. Like the teachers, my children have send home these, I'm going to say like this, like 10-minute sort of activity, or maybe something that's like, due next week and you can kind of hack away on it. And it's like a little tiny, like story they have to work on or something along those lines. But when you went right to that 50 minutes, 5th grade, I was like, ooh, that doesn't feel right to me. I mean, ultimately we're kind of using our gut, and I'm thinking about it just from my own experience that I don't know when we'd have the time most nights in order to do that, simply because like we're running in the door, trying to get dinner going, out the door to hockey, to drop off for music, for this, that, the next thing. There's a lot happening. And then I guess the next question would be is like, not only are the kids busy and, who's to blame for that? Is it the parents over programming? Is it the kids? Is it both? When they do have a moment to just sort of like take a breath to get to their safe place, which is home, right? For many students, not all students. I know some students, their situation might be different on the home front. But for most, you're hoping that students, when they get home, that they're feeling like, I can like breathe and like just relax a little bit. And it's almost like I'm picturing like you just got to get right back to it. And it's like, next task, keep going. And then the next thing you know, it's brushing teeth and time for bed. So now that's all based on just kind of a personal experience that we're having. Your daughters are a little bit older. What are things looking like in your world? So I've got grade 3, grade 5, your grade 7 and 9, right?
Correct.
Twins
7. Yeah. My twins are in 7th grade. And you know what, from their experience, mostly prior to this year, they've, in my oldest daughter in grade 9, when she was in elementary school, there's been no homework, almost none, almost no homework in especially mathematics. Maybe this year we witnessed some my 7th graders kind of studying for math tests. Maybe doing a couple extra things to get ready, but there's definitely no like set, hey, we got to complete this worksheet at home here in my household. I haven't seen that in a long time. Last time I remember seeing regular homework was back when they were in grade 1, and it was like language homework. It was like they had to like spell, different words. It wasn't really mathematics homework here. Now, the 9th grader does get a significant amount of homework each night, probably at least an hour each night. So it's kind of fitting that model of the 10 minutes per grade level, right? So she probably has more than an hour to do in the evenings, most evenings. But like you said, she's got jam-packed schedule from skating to swimming to playing basketball, playing volleyball. She's doing high school sports. So lots going on to manage. And I think, this 10-minute rule, Kyle, I don't know if I want to put like our stamp on saying like that is the rule of thumb you should follow, right? Like this whole like time limit on a homework kind of thing, saying like you have to give this much homework. I know that when I read or when our school gives out our daily planner at the beginning of the school year. In the front of the planner is like the student guide. It's got like the dress code, and it's got all this other stuff in there about like what to expect at school, and the day plan. But there was always like this general rule about homework listed. It was like, if you're in the 9th grade, you should get this much homework. It was like an hour and a half to 90 minutes, right? They're probably following this 10-minute rule. If you were in 11th and 12th grade, you should expect at least 2 hours of homework every night, which might be true. But I think it's for us, what we've come to learn is I think it's more about the quality of the homework, the purpose of the homework than the time of the homework. And I think that you'll find that as a main kind of theme as we discuss some of the options here today in this episode, is that we think about our intentionality of what we want to achieve in our classrooms and what we want to send home with students, if we want to send things home with students. So, Kyle, what about some of the other research we've heard here on this, like these kind of rules of thumb, but also maybe like the idea that I think we've heard like there is no merit to homework at lower grades versus, there is some correlation at higher grades. Let's chat about some of that research that's been floating around.
Yeah, something in I think not just education, but because we're in education, we see this a lot. I think it's almost like if you want to find research that supports your argument, you could probably find some out there. Like you could find an angle. But so before we take a deeper dive, we do have a number of different studies and sort of perspectives. I was just doing some research for this episode, and we found backtobasicslearning.com had an article about the 10-minute homework rule. And, they had sort of, come to the same conclusion we did, which was like the sort of the answer of like how much definitely varies, right? So like for younger students, like, trying to give them some, something at home to maybe get them thinking and reflecting might be helpful. But, again, like being very cautious on not overwhelming. But one part in this article, and we'll put it in the show notes for those who are really interested in looking at it, was just the part of homework that I think a lot of educators know this about homework, but again, it's like, I think we still have to be cautious about not setting a time limit or like this quantity of homework that we have to give in order to get this benefit. But, they do highlight this idea of like homework being a vital tool, they say, for enhancing a child's grasp of the coursework, an opportunity to review, as we know, assimilate, which is just this idea of like, kind of making more connections. Sometimes the second time around when you see something, it's like sort of like that light bulb goes off, and to prepare for upcoming material. But they also talk about the valuable skills, like just building like initiative and perseverance and developing time and management skills, right? Like these are things that humans in general are not great at. Like most adults struggle with time management skills, right? Like we all do. Like you get home and all of a sudden the time gets away from you. Some people in their jobs, it's a requirement in their job that they have to learn how to manage skills, and other jobs, it's not. It's sort of like you go to work and you're doing something maybe repetitive. If you're working, say, in a factory, or if you're working for yourself, like you might not develop those time management skills. The one I'm going to debate here a little bit, they say, it helps you learn to love learning. And I'm going to say like major asterisks there, because like, I'm like, maybe it could, but I think it could also like really make you hate learning too, depending on how we use it as a tool. Like, am I using homework as a tool, or am I using it as like almost like a weapon, right? Or like something that's going to cause students like to not enjoy it. And then finally, they talk about planning and organization, which I kind of lump into this time management skills piece. But, before we dig into the research, if you think about those skills, I think homework does help you do all of those things if we do it correctly. But here's the key piece, is that I think a lot of those, really, you could give 10 minutes and achieve the benefit there,
right?
Or it could be 3 hours and you can achieve that benefit for most of those, right? Because like whether it's 10 minutes or an hour, like you're going to still have to determine on, commit to doing it, make sure that you schedule time out to actually do it, bring your books home. Like you get all of that benefit regardless of how much there is. So
totally.
I think that's something as educators we should think about, when you're having this sort of like, philosophical debate about homework. It's that you can still achieve a lot of the benefit without necessarily like doing it like too much or like going way too hard or way too far on how much we use. What are your thoughts on that there, Jon?
I tend to agree with you, and I think one of the big things I think about when I'm thinking about homework is sometimes assigning homework can feel like there's this idea that if I assign homework, some students who are going to do it probably aren't the ones that needed to do it, and there's some students who won't do it, maybe needed to do it, but also that also sometimes aligns with generating a larger gap between those who have support at home and those who don't have support at home. And so even though the people, some students who will do it at home and have support at home, I don't want to say that we shouldn't give homework to those students just because they have that support. But I often want to think about, how can I do what you just said? How can I get the benefit of homework and all of these other benefits of assigning homework without widening that gap as much, right? Like, how I want the benefits of the homework, but I also want to see, help the students achieve those benefits. And that, I think that has to go with your time factor and not thinking about time to build those benefits in.
I love it. Yeah. And you like what you're saying sort of almost reminds me of the Matthew effect that, you hear about in Outlier, right? Like where, the students who are already sort of thriving, if they are the ones who are choosing to do the homework, or maybe they feel more confident and therefore it encourages them to do it and they feel like they can attain that end goal, that rich gets richer sort of perspective or scenario might take over. So it kind of brings me back to, once again, kind of thinking about, okay, is there a way that I could have homework structured in a way that more students can enter in, or more students are willing to engage in that work, in that activity? So, some of the things that we might want to think about is, and this was in that article that we just referenced, where they were talking about the different skills on backtobasicslearning.com. They mentioned a few things, which I think is really key, is like making sure that the amount of homework, that part, again, I think, is sort of up for debate, because like, what is the right amount? We can't say for certain, but I think, really being realistic and making sure the difficulty level matches the group of students, meaning like, what kind of homework is it? Is it to give them just a little bit of reinforcement from today, or like to consolidate today's learning? Maybe it's something that like we are spiraling back to. So it's something that that they know how to do, but you're maybe thinking, hey, listen, I want it to just come back to the forefront so you don't lose that skill. Henry, is it Picciotto, I believe is how we pronounce his last name. We knew him from the Twitter world, and he had lots of great things out. He has an article about lagging homework, which was something that was really intriguing to you and I. This is years ago. I think it was back in like 2015 when, you and I came across that, and we were like, wow, this idea that like you could teach concepts today, but tonight's homework might be something from like a week or a week and a half ago. So you've already had the opportunity to kind of revisit this idea. And now we're going to go into this sort of like purposeful practice stage on your own, because we don't want students feeling abandoned on their own, right? Like oftentimes, why do kids give up on homework? Well, they know that they don't have the support at home. They just learned the concept today. They didn't feel like comfortable with it. The bell went and the homework was assigned, and all of a sudden they're in no man's land by themselves. So if we were to roll back to last week, or a concept from 2 weeks ago, this idea of lagging, now all of a sudden the students like working on something that they've been seeing and they've been building on, and now they're given an opportunity to maybe strengthen that skill, or just to help them with the retention of that skill. What are some other things we might think about, as we work our way through this homework discussion and dig into some of what this research tells us?
Yeah. So this article also talked about that homework is only beneficial if it doesn't put it doesn't put the students under too much stress or pressure. Challenge is like assigning a challenge is healthy, but when with the stress and the worry, that's what wrecks it for those students. This is like going back to you mentioning before, is that a homework could be a love of learning, but if all of a sudden it's like nightly and we have an hour and a half and I'm stressed for time and I'm now feeling the crunch, and because if I don't submit this homework tomorrow in class, I'm gonna all of a sudden be penalized. That builds students' stress, and that can be very unhealthy for them in that case. And that will just contribute to their hate of mathematics or hate of learning. So the one thing that you want to think about the one thing I think about when we are assigning homework is exactly that. Like, what it has to deal with how much, I think, but also like, are they ready for this particular piece of homework today? I think, Kyle, when I first started teaching, I used to get into this habit of, okay, here's my lesson plan. My lesson plan is going to follow this very traditional structure. I'm going to do some examples and I'm going to give the homework out, and I'm going to pick questions from the textbook. I'm a high school math teacher. And I'm going to pick a good chunk of these, and I'm going to say, go. Whatever you don't get done in class is for homework. And whatever, some students may get a good chunk done, some students may not, but I think I didn't pick the questions based off, say, specific readiness of each student or the class. I taught my lesson without any formative assessment technique in my room, understanding what kids are picking, are they picking up what I'm putting down? I didn't hear discussions happening in the room, whether they were getting it or not.
Bow either.
Right. I didn't, well, you tied the bow at the beginning of those lessons, kind of in a sense, because like, today I'm going to teach you about this, and this is what we're going to learn about. And let me show you exactly how. But I think what I'm trying to say here is that I assigned homework whether they were ready or not. For some of this idea, right? So what we do now is, when we're teaching our problem-based lessons, and what we're seeing in the room, and what we're seeing students achieve the learning goal that we're looking for, and when I tie the bow on it at the end of the lesson, so we'll say, today we saw this strategy, this strategy, this strategy. Let me highlight this strategy over here, everybody. Now let's go and try that here and here and here. It's now a purpose of like, okay, did we see some strategies around the room, and did I get a sense of people understanding that strategy? Are they ready for this homework now to go and try that later? So this piece about healthy stress is, I think you can reduce the stress for students if you're assigning homework when they're ready for it.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say, Jon, is like, we really have to ask ourselves, like, are they ready for this independent practice? And, I'm envisioning, like, I'm telling you, I had all of the homework picked out at the beginning of a unit, oftentimes like for the entire school year. Like, I didn't necessarily show it to the students, but it was like I had all these ones done. And then, think about the element as well. Like, I used to give some time at the end of class for students to work. So they're working through the first ones that I would assign. And then it was like, when they had to go off on their own without the support of me and their students, all of like the harder problems were what they had to go home and grapple with independently, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. Right. So again, I'm not suggesting like we do the flipped classroom or anything like that, where, where students are doing that sort of work here. It's just thinking about, what are they truly ready for? And like, I'm thinking some of those harder problems you might want to use as like tomorrow's like problem of the day that you do at the beginning, and then maybe you give them an opportunity to try another challenging problem or something. Just because what ends up happening the next day, students come in, what are the problems that they all struggled with? It's like the last handful of problems, right? It's like, whether they tried it or not, it's almost like by default, the teacher always lets them off the hook because they're the harder problems, right? Yeah. So kind of picking up on those patterns, I think is really important.
Now I'm going to jump in here, Cal, because what I do now with this readiness factor and what I've come to enjoy and my students, I think, have come to appreciate. And now again, I teach high school, so this is if I taught, say, grade 7 and 8, I think I would do a similar approach here. But what I do now is give out kind of a choice in a homework, thinking about kind of this staggered homework in a sense, I used to call them like certain sections, and I think textbooks do this. Textbooks would say like part A, part B, part C, right? Like they have like these sections of questions that get harder over time. But I would pick out questions that I thought were from certain, from those certain sections of the textbook, or questions that were like what we did in class that day, the strategy that I wanted to highlight, and call those the core subject, core questions. These are the questions that I think everybody needs to make sure they can do, right? This is the baseline of where we need to be. This is like hey, if you can do these questions, you're pretty much approaching the expectation, or you've met the expectation. But then I would have like a section which was a little bit more challenging questions, like one of those kind of like, there's a little bit more spicy problems, right? There's a little spicier, and we call them like the build questions. And then I had like a couple questions that were push questions. These are like push your thinking, so that students could try those. And what this did was like, you didn't have to do the push questions. You were supposed to make sure that you should do the core questions, so that you felt like you were meeting the expectations, the learning goal for that particular day, or what strategy or model we were trying to highlight. And then you could venture forward. So this gave kids the freedom to go, look, I only have to do these seven, these seven or these five, or whatever the core happened to be. Sometimes the core was 3 questions. But it also gave the students who were looking for a little bit more challenge, the ability to have that challenge. And so it took the pressure off of what I used to do is assign all of them, and then say, everyone has to do all of them. And then the kids would feel like failures when they only did the core anyway. But the core is really what we're after. And then we can assign some push, some build to go forward. To give those kids kind of what they're looking for. They're like, hey, this was easy. Like, I'm not even going to do the core, because that's what I would have students do. They would skip the core questions because they're like, we did those in class already when we were at the boards. And so let me just go straight to the push or the build questions.
I love it. I love it. So basically, I'm hearing this idea of choice, this idea of really almost self or independent differentiation, where students have this opportunity to think of who they are and like reflect on where they are in their own learning journey and work from there. And I'm sure there's times, Jon, where you have that handful of students where you're like, I feel like you could put more in it.
Right.
And, you have that discussion with that student. You try to encourage them, but ultimately at the end of the day, if they are doing what, is going to help them achieve that standard, then that is up to them. But we are there as that coach, as that mentor, to kind of push them and try to get them to, to push for as far as they can go, right? Just like any coach in any sport or any learning situation. So I love that. So Jon, let's dig into some of this research here. Let's chat here before we start wrapping things up, because I think we've shared some ideas, at least for you to be thinking on. Okay. I'm going to just like, kind of ruin things a little bit here and say, like, the research is not definitive out there. There's arguments that kind of push either way. One here, this is from Harris Cooper in a 2006 meta-analysis. We pulled this from a time.com article. We'll put this in the show notes as well. Harris Cooper's from Duke University, and went into this and actually found that, there was a positive correlation between homework and student achievement. Now, let's remember, though, it's positive correlation, it doesn't necessarily, it's not causation. They're not saying there's a like necessary cause, but they did notice that when homework was happening, there was a positive correlation. But the nuance is that the correlation was stronger for older students in 7th through 12th grade. So this is where a lot of this research kind of comes out, that in the elementary grades, like, homework is no good. However, his research went on to say that there still was a weak correlation between homework and performance in K through 6. So, for those who are maybe not, teaching stats, or maybe they're not teaching at that level where they're not sure how that works. Basically, it means it's under a 0.33 or under a 33% positive correlation. So if you look at this graph, it's like trending up to the left, or sorry, up to the right. I'm going up to the left for those watching right here. You're seeing this trend, but it's like probably like the dots are like much more scattered. So it's not like a nice straight line. like a strong or a perfect correlation
Well,
would be.
yeah.
But it's still suggesting that there could be some benefit there. And now here's the other part that we don't necessarily have all the details on, is like, how much was given? Like, was
Right.
it the one problem we were talking about for the grade 1 students? So the family is now welcomed into what's happening in the classroom. Like, I think of, again, the benefit of that, where you go, oh, now that I know what math topic you're talking about, maybe I can ask you when we're in the grocery store another problem
Right.
that's that concept, right? So maybe there's amazing benefits of doing exactly that, but we just don't know all of the conditions on what this homework really looks like. Like, how's it being delivered? Is the students sitting there and just doing a worksheet by themselves? Are they, are their parents sitting there and supporting them? We don't know any of those details. And I'd have to argue that it's probably like inconsistent because of that. However, when we swing to that grade 7 to 12 scenario, we do see that the correlation is stronger. So what that tells me is that, you know what? We definitely want to consider what role does homework play, but something like you said, I think we have to be cautious of is, remember that we don't want to stress out our students either. Like, we don't want, if I'm the grade 7 teacher and I teach all subjects, really easy for me to go, listen, I'm going to give my grade 7s some math tonight, but I'm not going to give them anything else. Or I'm going to give them social science tonight, but I'm not going to give them anything else. When you get into grade 9 or any grade where there's like more of a rotation of different teachers, this gets ugly very quickly. And I'm sure, your daughter, Jon, is going to start seeing this when, she's in grade 9 now.
Mm-hmm.
If those teachers start assigning, 30, 45 minutes each, right? Thinking, well, that's not that much for my class. And then she has these 3 other classes. You could quickly see how that might actually like spin her into more of like a negative, the negative side of school, and may feel more negatively towards school, but then also may get some negative effects of like feeling stressed, maybe, feeling like a failure, whatever those things may be. So, just using caution with how we give this homework and why we're giving the homework, I think is a really, really key piece here.
Yeah, and I think going back to your correlation idea is like, correlation doesn't mean causation, in a sense that there could be a third factor that makes both go up at the same time, right? So like you had talked earlier in the episode about, some of the benefits of homework, which is like taking initiative, developing time management skills, but those things are also things that could cause that correlation to go up together, right? So it's kind of like those things might be the things that they benefit from, but also those, if I already have those things, then that's going to cause, this correlation to increase together between homework and, say, test scores or the ability to learn this thing. It's because these other things are also at play. So it's hard, like you said, to kind of figure that part out. But I've lost where I was going to go now. Where are we going to go now? Let me just.
I was kind of setting you up for this part because, like, there is research. You could say, like, you had mentioned about the pitfalls of homework, and like there is research that does support that too much time on homework can cause stress, physical health problems, balance, that sort of thing. Right. So the key is, though, again, is like, but how much is too much? So like we have to use our professional judgment.
So yeah, so the other side of this is also that having too much homework leads to that, say, negative effect, that hate of learning, or it could add to that stress, that physical health problems, maybe a lack of balance or even alienation from society, from students having too much. Like, I know that my daughter, when she has a lot, I don't see her. She's up in her room. She's doing homework. She's crunching away at things. And you think about our students, especially as they get older, right, Kyle? They're involved in more things. Like, I know that my daughter is involved in so many things at school already. Just being in the 9th grade. Also outside of school with her extracurricular activities on sports. They're thinking about, if I'm getting assigned 90 minutes in grade 9, or an hour or almost 2 hours in grade 9 sometimes, what does that look like for their time schedule, right? Like, think about their daily schedule, like think about their clock, from start wake up time to bedtime. They're going to sleep 8 hours, maybe, hopefully we got some 8 hours of
That's what
sleep
you're
here.
hoping. Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully we get up early enough to like start our day well and get our breakfast. That's a couple let's hope that's a couple hours. I know that my daughter is not taking a couple hours to do that. But that morning time, getting ready time, getting to school time, like there's probably only 14 hours of day left after that. And then you're 6 hours at school. Then there's like getting home time after that, and then like probably some decompress time, or maybe spend some time with the family. Now we're talking like 6 hours left in total. She's got to go to swimming on twice a week. She's got to do skating twice a week, which we know have various benefits, and we don't want to give those up. We're talking 4 hours. That she's going to want to watch some TV, or socialize on social media with her friends. It doesn't leave a lot of time, right? So it doesn't leave a lot of time when we start to rack up those things, and as they get older, not even to mention a job, right, Kyle? If they have a job after school, as they get into more senior level high school, how much time they have for homework itself. So I think what we want to really say here is we all have to make this decision, and there are benefits to homework, there are downsides of homework, but I think thinking about the intentionality, right, Kyle, of the homework is the key idea here.
Absolutely. When I kind of reflect on this discussion, and as I mentioned, I'll put in the show notes a bunch of the articles that we were referencing and some of the research that we were sharing. When you look at it, it's like so many things in life. Like there's so many ways you can do good with a tool, but there's also a lot of ways that you can do bad with it as well. So, really thinking it through, like, why am I doing what I'm doing, and being cautious about that. I think my big takeaway here, if I could only remember one thing from this episode, I'm sort of picturing this idea that like maybe time and homework shouldn't be the goal. Maybe it should be that intentionality. Like, what is the intent of why I'm giving this homework? And how much time does the student need in order to meet that intentionality? Maybe tonight it's 20 minutes. Maybe tomorrow it's 35 minutes. If it gets too high, then maybe my intentionality is a little too ambitious, right? Like if that number gets too high, I can't help but mention that, you had mentioned the research about the pitfalls of homework and stress and physical health problems and lack of balance and even depression. We'll put the link in the show notes, but they had mentioned that students in those schools that experience this stress, all of these negative effects, these side effects, were being given about 3.1/10 hours of homework on average each night. So that means some, like half of the group is less than that, but the other half is above that. And like when you think about that breaks that 10-minute rule, even if you were trying to follow it. But my guess is that it's probably a bunch of different teachers assigning different amounts of homework and not realizing how much, sort of pressure they're putting on students. So make intentionality of why you're doing that the goal, and use time as sort of like your governor. So it's like if I break through that ceiling where you go, oh shoot, maybe I've gone a little, like maybe I got a little too excited and now I got to roll back a little bit. So focus on what you want for students, and then use that as your compass, and use time as sort of a limiter so that you don't, overwhelm students or get a negative result. How about you, John? What's your big takeaway?
Good tips there. My big takeaway when I think about assigning homework to my students is just thinking about the benefits specifically, and how can I achieve the most benefits for the most amount of students without trying to widen the gap between, students who have that support at home, who don't have that support at home. So knowing your students in class, I think, is extremely important, and what the makeup is of what that support at home is, and how can I assign a piece of homework, or how can I assign, extra practice, or maybe it's an activity, or maybe it's like you said, a kind of a reflective prompt, so that it doesn't widen the gap as much, but strengthens what we talked about that day, or what we're going to look at the next day. I think that's what I like to think about, and I think that's that's what we should ask ourselves. How can I assign, or how can I give out this homework, if I need to give out this homework, to benefits the most students, for the most good.
I love it. I love it. Well, Math Moment Makers, you heard it from us. Those are our reflections on today's episode. So how about you? Can you spend a little bit of time here reflecting on what you've heard here? What resonated with you? Is there something that you're going to take and try to implement into your routine or into your homework practice? Is homework something that maybe you're going to consider now in a younger grade? Like we described in that grade 1 scenario, where you just send one simple problem home as a means to communicate with parents and let them have a glimpse into your math classroom. Or maybe you've thought something else. You're a grade 12 teacher, and you realize maybe you're laying it on a little too hard. Whatever resonated with you, we'd love to hear about it, whether it be on social media or maybe it's as a review on your podcast app. Take a moment, pause, and hit that rating and review section of your app, and let us know. We'd love to hear what you learned in this episode.
In order to ensure you don't miss out on the new episodes as we put them out on Monday mornings, be sure to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button right now, and you'll be notified when we put that episode out on Monday, and you won't miss it. And you'll catch the next one automatically in your player.
I love it. District friends, we have only a couple spots in the near future for some district friends who are looking to make a real district transformation in their math programming. Reach out to our district improvement program team over at makemathmoments.com/district, where you can find out more information about how we can help you wave that magic wand, that wish list wand in your district, and start working towards having a super effective, engaging, and transformational math program in your district.
Show notes and links to resources and complete transcripts for this episode can be found over at makemathmoments.com/episode 212. Again, that's makemathmoments.com/episode 212.
Well, my Math Moment Maker friends, until next time, I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm Jon Orr.
High fives for us.
And a high five for you.